Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is the nephew SIG Automation Meeting, Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. So I can pull up the agenda. I did add one thing when in front of the agenda you had put together, mostly because I'm
John, you're on mute.
Yeah, it's the stupid shares tab audio automatically. Okay. Okay, so I was saying I added one item mostly because I am concerned that I was hoping to have a plan in 2 days from now, and we're, I would say, not very close at all to having a plan. And I wanted to, you know, I guess, raise that to the larger group and say, hey, any thoughts or ideas? I mean, my thought or idea right now is to just iterate more on this document, start putting things into GitHub, start putting things I did. You know, start putting, like I started putting a glossary into GitHub, which isn't really a design, but it's like Stephen had a somewhat of a design document. We have different pieces, and I can sit down and make an attempt to iterate one more time on making it more concrete. A bunch of folks did contribute to the document, so maybe that's our best plan of action, but I wanted to know if other people had thoughts or ideas on how we can accelerate getting us to something concrete and executable, because it's moving too slow, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think we have a number of things. Okay. If you give me, my comment is the following. I think what we have in the document right now is a decomposition of components, right? That need to be there. Now, do we already, okay, we have probably a high level view on how they work together somehow, but we don't know all the details yet, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So what we could do is assume a number of things on what they do and how they are supposed to work, and based on that, identified, because what you need is probably an owner for each of these components, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that's
yeah. So that's what we probably need to do is add people and names to it, right? And ask for volunteers probably to each of those components. And as a result, but it's hard for those people to probably volunteer. I'm just thinking out loud here. Yeah. So it's hard for people to volunteer if they don't know exactly how those things are supposed to work.
Yep.
That's what I believe why people are probably hesitant to put their names up, because they don't know yet what they will sign up for. And we are still also discussing like the CRD proposal and stuff. So there is still a lot of unknowns in general, which makes us be why we are in that situation, I think. But okay, Anne has her hands up, so please.
Oh, hi. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm hesitating because I'm not so sure it's the right place for it, but maybe an architecture diagram of just the components that we can deliver for R1 and their interaction may help clarify. I don't know if we should include it in the planning document or in a separate document. Yeah, I'm open.
I think it should be an output of the planning process for sure.
Okay.
What I guess probably that should be a line item. Like maybe we need to just, this is a good point. Maybe we just need to at least deliver a plan for the design deliverables that we need for R1, even if we can't deliver a broader plan.
And then with the volunteers and names, once we have the components and their responsibility, their interactions, people can feel more comfortable signing up. Plus, it helps us scope how much work is there per component.
Yeah,
so that's where I was
No,
going.
that's a good point. Like, I mean, before Jean-Marie talks, I just wanted to, Wim was saying, like, for example, the unknowns, like the CRD definition, but that's just, and that's another line item, right, in that planning, and maybe we're trying to be too, I'm because of the short timeline, I'm trying to push down to as concrete as we can, but maybe we're just not quite there yet. Jean-Marie?
So I agree with Anne that the having an architecture diagram would help to position the components together. One thing that I find striking when I'm looking at the components and artifact lists, okay, I have one that is a kind of an API, which is the NFCRDs, and that's the only API that I have. And all the rest, it's functions or components, and what are the APIs? And in fact, in an architecture, that's the set of APIs that is the most important.
Yeah, I see us as having actually only two very simple APIs. Well, not very simple, but two APIs, really. One is exactly what you just said, the CRDs. The other is the actually lower level one of that, which is the Porch APIs. Beyond that, it's the standard Kubernetes APIs. I don't think we need anything beyond that, in my opinion.
Well, but are we having only NF CRDs, or are we having resources? Some of them being network functions, other being infrastructure resources, others being platform level resources, and with dependencies between them.
Well, you're right. There's a dependency API piece that I think is listed there that we also need. I may not have explicitly said it as an API, but that's a good point. I think the resource is okay. Fair enough.
So basically, I'm not asking for something that is full-fledged, okay? But I think to Anne's point, putting those components into a diagram and saying there are CRDs that are representing the APIs between those two components, or between those two components, that's not through CRD, that's through another mechanism, etc. Would help. Will help positioning the global picture.
Tal?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick comment on this. We do have some other APIs, actually. I mean, we do communicate with Porch, we do communicate with Git. So they're not APIs that are part of Nefio, but yeah, I'm going to volunteer Arvin here, my colleague Arvin, who he has already volunteered to create this kind of higher level diagram to look at this, the workflow of everything. And I know it's in progress, but right, I think last time we got the diagram from Stephen, which I think was the best one we had so far in showing like, what are the pieces and what are they responsible for? But I still think it's, we got feedback from people, still don't understand the workflow. Like, how do you get from the beginning to the very end? And I think Arvin is trying to put that together. So hopefully that will clarify. I call it the journey of a network function, right? From the moment you create that first CRD, what actually happens, what is called when, until you get the final result of a deployed network function at the edge cluster, right? And there are a few protocols on the way. There are a few components. So yeah, I think we're close there. Arvin can say more. I'll add one more point about what we talked about before about starting to create issues on GitHub. And there's some worry about, people being responsible. I would say, a lot of us are used to working in the agile method where you have issues, you create them, you assign them to people, and then they're responsible. I would suggest for where we are right now, we take it a little bit more loosely. We can create these issues, but really treat, in a sense, all of them, for now at least, as nice to haves. That is, we're not committing anything quite yet, but we're starting. It's draft issues, right? And as we move ahead, we'll decide which ones are priority and which ones aren't. And we can maybe tag them. for example, we can set for some issues, say, you know what, this is interesting, but maybe it's post R1, and we tag them with R2 or something like that, or TBD or similar. So yeah, I think we're kind of stuck in the chicken and egg issue right now, where we're not creating these issues yet because we're not sure about the design. But I think we can do both. We can just start creating these issues in a kind of draft way, not being too committed to them, and let it iterate and see which issues actually stay and survive for R1. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
But I would like to hear, I know I see Fisher, I would like to hear from Aravind, who Chal just voluntold. And so, but we can go in the order of hands.
No, I'll yield to Aravind, and I'll go after him.
So Aravind, what do you think about that? What's your ETA on that? We are trying to get to something concrete. I just, well, anyway, well, let's hear from you. Nope, we can't hear you.
He's unmuted, but might be a different issue.
Might be a double mute. Oh, okay.
Put it in.
I was just gonna say, oh, Steven's on, so he can talk about it. But we met last night with Ronak, I think, and a couple other engineers from Capgemini, I believe, and we talk about AMF and SMF next step. And I just want to echo what Tal said about the diagram that Stephen had put together. It's a little scary at first, but once you get into it, it makes sense. And I was going to suggest, after we hang up last night, it dawned on me that a sequence diagram of the workflow might be very helpful as the next step. And I'm tempted to take a crack at it if Arvin or Stephen are not doing it. I don't want to step on toes, but
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Something weird is going on my end. Yeah, just a quick comment. So I've started working, started putting together a doc with some of the stages. So one thing I'm realizing is I was looking at what we did for one summit, right? So there is a lot of details and we have documentation, but I think what we also need to do is for each of these, so I'm calling it stages, like once you submit NF topology to NF topology controller, then it creates a package deployment, right? Like which is consumed, let's say, by the package variant controller. So each of these stages are dependent on a lot of custom resources. So which is not very obvious when you look at it. Like, for example, just to give a flavor, right? Like NF topology controller kind of depends on cluster CRs the package deployment controller, for example, depends on what cluster CRs are around so that it can create variations of, let's say, the free 5GC UPF package, right? That those kind of dependencies we need to call out for each of these stages in the as the packet flows through the architecture. So that is what I'm trying to do. But there's a lot of details, right? So I'm trying to see how we can illustrate that better so that it's easy for everybody to consume. So I'm in the process. So I'm hoping a week. It should take a week. My hope is Monday next week. I want to have it, if possible, earlier.
Now, if I quickly may, if you look to the diagram that I built, right? In my view, it has it. What it does not have is the numbers on which it happened. But for me, the order in which you go through that flow is defining all of these things with the sequence and its dependencies. So I have not described. So can I share maybe quick, John? I'll just wanted to.
Yeah, I think before we do though, I think Ann and Vish have hands.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sorry, John. I just want to confirm that Arvin is not going to do the sequence diagram. If he is, I'll leave it to him. But if not, I'd like to take a crack at it for the sequence. And it could be either Vim or Steven sequence. I think there's some differences there, or the merge sequence if we get to a common place. At least for the SMF, because that's how I tend to think in terms of trying to translate to code.
So let me clarify, right? So that when I say sequence, right, it's not whatever I was describing. It's not like just architecture diagram. It was more like a deep dive into exactly what happens. Like, how do the CRs change?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do an architecture diagram or a very high level sequence. It's going to be a deep dive. For example, right? So we know that the conditions are there, right? And each of them are creating conditions. How do the package division resources, for example, change? Things of that nature, which is a little bit nuanced. And I'm not sure if everybody is on the same page on those nuances, right? Some of us might understand, but not all of us understand. So it's going to be a deep dive more than an architecture diagram or anything like that. At least that's my hope.
Okay. So maybe we can, sorry, really quick, Aravind, maybe we can, take it offline, interact, and I can learn and help out wherever it's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sounds good to me. Yep.
Cool. Thanks. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, I had a question in this regard. I'm not a comment, so just a question. So I'm asking. Sometimes when it gets too convoluted or diagram gets too busier, a plain old text makes things much easier. So in addition to the diagrams, if there is a pure, like 1 or 2 page of sequence of steps that's happening, this will happen first to second, like that, then probably whoever is consuming, probably they can look at the diagram, look at the text, and then probably it may be easier to decipher and understand. If the workflow is too complex and too chatty.
It's going to be, at least the one I'm working on, is going to be a combination of both diagram and text.
That would be great. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Aravind. Yeah.
Yeah, but again,
and Aravind, are you going to put it in such a way that this can become an architecture and that we can put as an MD for release 1 or something like that we can document in Markdown, which you can put to GitHub, and then we can have that as a reference architecture?
I'm not sure about that. So I'm working on it. So how about this? We'll review it, and if we think it is useful, then we can create an MD. But I'm open to comments, right? Like, this is my interpretation of how things are working. But certainly we all should kind of look at it, comment, and then maybe we can evolve that into an MD together.
Sure.
That makes sense.
I think Fish is next.
Yeah. So, Tal, you had mentioned about opening issues. Are issues being opened against R1 release at this point of time already? Because one, I wanted to definitely make sure we have the scope defined before we start opening issues, right? In general, and the plan in place and reviewed.
Well, it's the document that John started about it's linked right there, the Nefia 1 planning doc. We've started to get comments for it, but I think, this is the time. If you want to throw your hat in the ring and define the scope of R1, that's where you do it. This document is open to anybody here to edit.
Correct.
It's not.
I think it was sent out about a week back. I think the Friday of last week before, right,
True.
John? Okay. Because I was thinking about what issues are being already open. I was like, I thought I probably missed something.
No, I don't think yet, but I'm calling for us to start because I just feel the clock ticking very, very quickly for May. So
makes sense.
Yeah, we can basically, my idea is pretty straightforward, just to go over that document and turn actual bullet points into issues. And again, we can delete the issues, we can put them to later. So
that's what I was thinking. That doc should be the source of truth for opening any issues in terms of, you should be able to trace it back.
Ultimately, GitHub becomes a source of truth, Fish. The document was intended to, so just from a point of process, I tend to find docs quicker to interact on than issues sometimes.
Yes.
But they're also sort of not as discoverable, and so really, source of truth should all move into GitHub, and maybe it's making things worse to start things in docs. So I'm fine with moving everything that's in that doc to different issues and deprecating the doc. I'm open to whatever.
Cool.
Just whatever works best for our team to execute together and coordinate.
Yeah. Something similar to what you did for the workshop, where people could go look it up and sign up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Cool. Nice. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, from what's your intent purpose, I think opening the dock and opening up for the community and asking feedback, I think that was a great start, John. I agree that
Okay.
probably we could iterate on
Okay.
that. Yeah. And
So
then
maybe Dimitri's had his hand up for a long time, but maybe what we should do is convert the doc to, even though I'd hope to get something further along before we convert it to issues, but maybe we just do it now and we just start that. Dimitrios? We can't hear you. I don't know. I can't hear you anyway.
No,
yeah, we can't
we'll
hear
come
you.
back. No, we
Yeah,
can't hear
we'll
you.
come back to you, Dimitrios, if you can figure out your thing. I don't know if when you wanted to go through.
See, I just wanted to, yeah. One
Yeah, because
more,
the flow,
wait,
yeah.
how
it's
do I
top to bottom, yeah.
how
So
do I share?
let me stop sharing maybe then.
Wait a minute. Where do I share? Here. I share here. Yeah, so I just wanted to iterate. Now, I do agree. See, what I try to do with this diagram is document some of it, and I understand it's not complete, but the way what I did not do, and maybe I should have done, is basically add numbers, right? Because actually the way this was constructed was based on numbers. So, and I try to also build a relationship with the CRDs in here. So in other words, if you look to the sequence again, I'll go through it. Your 3.5GC is dependent on these two CRs that are in the system. And the result of this controller is spitting out a package deployment, right? Then there is another controller who picks that up. I didn't show the fan out here, which is basically creating, so I even written here, create package, reference to create, yeah, so I'm probably, it's a create namespace, update cluster context with site info, puts a condition to true, update UPF deployment. What we could do, I think, or what is useful is probably describe what is happening here rather than just this text so that people have a better understanding. And then what you see is that then this kicks in. So this would be number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And this shows all the steps that are actually happening on the management cluster until that edge is dehydrated. Now, I think what is very useful in my point of view is basically describing these steps in more details, what each of these things do and how they work together. And I think that's beneficial. Now, this is the POC, right? We probably need that for release 1 because what we are doing, yes, all the changes, because if you look today, I mean, I basically did a new proposal on the CRDs. There is some restructuring to some of these things. So that means that the way they do things will be different. So one way of going through the details, I mean, it's just a proposal to see what people think is, I always think everything starts at the top. So we first need to describe what happens at the top, agree on that structure, identify the first component that acts, which probably is equivalent of this, and say what it does from the moment. And then we can go step by step by step. And then basically once we have sufficient detail on that first component, we could ask, okay, who's volunteering to be responsible for that and take that further. And as such, we can maybe detail each of these components into more details, describe what they do. And as a result, we go along, right? Because I think we were a bit ambitious to say mid-February, we have a full plan. Given the state, given the current state of understanding that everybody has, it's not realistic, I think. But maybe I personally, that would be a way that I would go through it to get through that situation. Okay, sorry. Dimitrios, you are back.
I think it's still his same.
Still stuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in really quick until Dimitrios is back with voice audio.
Yes.
What got me a little concerned last night when I talked to Stephen and the Capgemini team was there are two diagrams and there's some differences in the two. And for somebody who tried to arrive at a common understanding, I'm not so sure which direction we're going between the two. I mean, they're very similar, but there's enough differences in them that, you know,
I think
can we
I
get
think
to an-
what would help, it's a question, right? If we have text that describing each of these steps, right? So all of a sudden you have a sequence diagram and more detail on what they do. So you could look at that document as a way that referencing. I don't know what Aravind is doing, something like that. But if you describe what is happening here, the reason I built this, it was for myself to understand what was going on. So I basically built this. I looked at the code. I looked at, okay, what is happening? And then I built this diagram. For me, just because I could not write this thing unless I understood what was happening. So I built for myself.
Exactly. No,
And-
no,
and-
logically
this is from the
speaking, the two
workshop.
diagrams are similar.
Yeah.
But there are some differences. And I'm not comfortable making a decision on the difference, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that would be something we debate in those issues and or documents. And I
Okay.
think that some of the differences, this is documenting what we did in the workshop. So when this is the proof of concept we did in the workshop. There are changes between this and R1. And so we need to figure out what the right changes are. Part of the changes are the CRDs themselves are different. We don't have a 5G core topology CRD. We have an NF topology. We have an NF instance set. We may or may not have package deployment versus package variant because Porch is providing some of that. Like we're going to have different pieces are going to switch out. Some functionality might shift around a little bit. We might have new things come in. So that's what we need to. But yeah. So the things I like about this diagram, there's two things. One is, especially once these sequences are put in, it shows that flow. But then like you can see that package on the left under Edge 1, it's showing how the package is composed of multiple independent resources that are provisioned or managed by different components in the system. And so that to me shows that collaborative nature. So to me, right, because again, I'm coming from that sort of configuration management point of view. To me, part of the things we're trying to demonstrate here are that we're building a mechanism for building out, scaling out these packages in a scalable, collaborative a way that they can be scalable and collaborative and manageable over day 1, 2, 3. And that helps show that. So I don't know, it's obvious it's incomplete. There's lots of stuff that's not shown on the diagram, but to me, this shows the heart of it. I'm curious what Arvind's working on and, yeah, Tal, and it looks like he has a hand too, and Aravind
Yeah,
too.
so I really don't mean criticism of any of the few diagrams that we
No,
have.
no,
I
no.
think they all come from a place of individuals trying to understand. I can just say from my perspective, what I'm still missing, looking at this, I know the pieces, right? I'm still missing. I don't see the calls to Porch API. I don't see the actual CRs. I don't see where Git comes into here, which different repositories we have, like moving from a blueprint repository to a deployment repository. Where's config sync here, right? I'm still missing, like going from the beginning to the end.
Sure.
There's a lot going on, and I see the components, right? But I don't actually know how they work. I'm missing a narrative. For me, that's still, I know it in my mind, but it needs to be turned into some sort of diagram. And yeah, I'm sorry, Arvind, I volunteered you. I know you're doing things with your own purpose, but that is my wish, for that diagram to exist. I don't know if that was what you were thinking of doing for yourself, but if nobody else ends up doing it, I'll do it.
So I can add.
Sorry,
a little bit.
Arvind.
Oh, I apologize. No,
No, go ahead.
real quick.
Your turn.
Really quick here. To be honest, I like this diagram a lot. Of course, when I tried to draw a diagram which shows everything, it was impossible, right? There was no way to draw one diagram which kind of encompasses everything. And honestly, I did try that. and quickly, I realized very quickly that whatever Wim has done here is amazing, right? It's really shows a lot of things. the things that it doesn't show, like I said, is the CR details and things like that, that you cannot show in this diagram. There's just no way, right? So at least what I'm trying to do is this diagram, if somebody doesn't understand anything about Nefio, it will take them to 60% or 70%, right? It will get them there. And then beyond that, they need to kind of deep dive a little bit to understand what's going on, which is what I'm trying to at least attempting at, right? Like each step, like for example, whatever Wim is showing here, step 1, right? It combines 5G core topology, UPF class, and creates package deployment. So what I'm trying to do is kind of double click on that step 1 and try to show the details. Okay, what is 5G core topology CR? What is UPF class? How is it combining them? And how is it creating? In addition to whatever Tal mentioned, where is the Git coming from? How config sync comes in, and all those things, right? A little bit of a deep dive rather than architecture diagram.
So
Sorry.
interestingly, like what Tal was describing to me, what I heard was actually a step back from this, or maybe it was both. But like, right? So I think like this is exactly what I want to do, is figure out what are the artifacts we need from a design perspective to help people fully understand and sign up. Like Wim was saying, sign up for something, or Anne was saying, like it sounds like we have this diagram. We have one Arvin's working on that's maybe a drill in even closer. But Tal, it sounds like you want one that's got, it's like a different, it's an orthogonal cut, you know, on the concepts. And if that's something you could work on, that would be super helpful. Maybe we could get to the point where we have a series of diagrams and a sequence diagram from Anne, like that give that full picture from all those different directions.
So can I add? Oh, sorry,
Anne,
please go ahead. Sorry, we
are
no,
sorry. My idea of a sequence diagram was focusing on the SMFs and how it gets deployed as part of the larger flow, because I'm not comfortable tackling the whole thing, right? I'm not, I don't have enough.
So that's sort of this is the, yeah, that's a sort of
subsequent diagram.
Yeah, on could be more like a design for SMF, basically, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
We have a diagram of what you intended to do, or you and Varesh, I guess, we intended to do for SMF. Yeah,
that
so
sounds
that's
great.
That's a little less about the entire architecture. This reflects ONE Summit things. So this is on UPF only too, right? So
Hello.
The idea is, just to pause a second. So, right, we're building out a set of machinery, and one thing we can feed through the machinery is UPF. One thing we can feed through the machinery is SMF. One thing we can feed through is AMF, and they're going to have slightly different utilization of that machinery. They're going to use different CRDs to do different things in slightly different ways. So having sequence diagrams for each of those, I think, is very helpful, and it helps us. Again, we're trying to discover, we're building that machinery. So we're trying to discover what machinery that needs, and in order to, or what machinery we need to build. And of course, it's to serve a purpose, which is the AMF, UPF, SMF deployment. So I think that would be super helpful.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, Demetrius, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Something is wrong with my headset, I don't know. But I just wanted to contribute to the discussion and say that I have, like last week, for 3 days, I was investigating the Nefio POC, and I can say that some things are not so clear through the documentation, and it took me like a long time to understand how all those things are actually interconnected together. So and I can give you some feedback if you want, because like for instance, when it comes to the UPF package that you have on the top, right? You are not able to actually correlate the UPF package with some UPF class and 5G core topology through the web GUI right now. So that is not obvious, and you have to do that through the command line. Otherwise, you are not able to actually spin up any UPF package based on some 5G core topology. So that is not obvious at all, I will say, and it took me like a long time to understand how this thing works. So that is one thing, and the second thing is that that I have right now at the top of my head is that And it's not clear at all how you delete a package that you have already deployed. So in my case, I could not even delete the package deployment. It was always recreated automatically by some operator probably. And, yeah, and I
You have
have
to
no idea
delete
how to delete the
you have to
package.
delete. You have to delete the topology, but at the moment, I don't think we have. It's only create at the moment, so there is a lot of there is some issues with
It's
updating.
very much a proof of concept, right? It's not a
Yeah.
complete
We
solution.
ignored that side
Yeah,
during the
I
POC.
mean, it would be nice to be able to delete the NF deploy or 5G core topology deployment and the entire deployment is gone.
So
We're
in my
very far
case,
away from that.
yeah. So in my case, I just messed up the environment and I destroyed all the clusters and then recreate them again in order to have like a clean environment. So those things are not so obvious, I will say, from the current documentation right now. Yeah, and the interconnects on how those conditions are met between the different controllers also, that is not really clear. So yeah, all those stuff.
Demetrius, could you
Yeah, can you file buttons?
can you put these questions
Feature,
somewhere,
yeah.
either in the agenda, or maybe just create an issue, even in the one summit, or in the create
Create an issue.
Just
Create an
document
issue. I
some-
think,
Yeah.
John, let's create an issue because I think Ravi did the same. There was a few issues that he found. He created issues, so I've done some investigation on some of them. So I
Okay.
fixed, I think, at least one of the issues. But
So some
I
of
think it's
these,
good to create an issue on the one summit.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
there is a
Mhm.
we did a lot of shortcuts, by the way. So like update, delete. We haven't really paid attention up.
It's very much a proof of concept, right? It's not a
Yeah.
complete product in any way. And so maybe that needs to be stated more clearly. I mean, I don't know that we'll fix those things in the one summit, right? Because we're working towards R1, but obviously for something
Yeah,
more usable.
they could become work items for R1. Yeah.
Exactly.
And,
yeah.
And another thing is that I have noticed, like inside the 5G core topology, that you have like an item there that it says UPFs, which is a list, right? So does that mean that you can actually in the same 5G core topology have multiple UPF classes in
So
there?
this is a great question. So this gets to the CRD design. So
Yeah.
in that, so first of all, 5G core topology is going away, right? We have something else called NF topology. But the idea was, I think like ISTI's presented this idea of instance set. That's sort of analogous to what we had. Each of those things listed under UPF was a sort of a UPF set. So yes, the idea was you could have multiple configurations. Again, it gets down to what you put in the 5G core topology was trying to capture the parts of the UPF configuration that are invariant across a set of UPFs. That's essentially what instance set is, right? It's the in the newer model that ISTI is working on. It's a set of information that's invariant across instances of the function across a geography, across a list of clusters. So it's a matter of teasing apart the dimensions where variants come in. One dimension where variants come in is across geography. Another dimension is across functional configuration of the UPF. So the UPFs listed multiply there would be, I don't know what those things are, but like it would be like, oh, here's a set of UPFs that use this particular set of configurations. Here's a set of UPFs that use this different set of configurations. The first set I want on these 20 clusters, and the second set I want on those 40 clusters. So that was the idea. Now the model's not right because the model's all jammed into one thing because we had like 2 weeks to do the whole thing. So the work that Wim and Stephen and ISTI and others are doing on those CRD models will try and do a better job of representing those concepts than we've done in the workshop.
I see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I mean, if you think that is helpful, I will create some issues when I find some time. But yeah,
yes,
I think the sequence diagram will be really helpful because it's not really clear where those packages are come from in POC. Are those external blueprints? Are organizational blueprints? Those are not really clear when you execute the POC. So I think it would be great help for many people to understand.
So how many people are doing a sequence diagram now? Just curious. It seems like at least 3 or 4 people are doing it.
So what I've written down, no, good question, Stephen. What I've written down is Anne will work on an SMF sequence diagram. Arvind is working on a drill-in to WIMS diagram. And I wrote down, I didn't actually hear Tal agree to this, but I wrote it down with a question mark, to drawing some sort of higher level or cross-sectional diagram that captures a bigger, it's a different angle, right? It's a different angle on the same thing.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is wait for the others to finish and then criticize an app. That's easiest. So
No, Tal, I need your diagram, especially with the different repos.
I do too, but I do think there's too much work. So well, let's do this. Arvind is my colleague. We work together, so maybe I'll let him start working on this. And Arvind, if it's okay, I'll jump in and say, I would like more stuff here. This is what I would like, and we'll see if that works. How's that?
Yeah. So
we can maybe work on it together.
Now, John, a question in general to the team is like, are we, I think, by the way, it's very important, right? That's why a couple of, I think 2 weeks ago, we started with going through this again to get people more understanding. But I do agree that documentation is much better than just explaining. Now, should we not do that in context of release 1? Because if we want to have deliverables eventually, we should do that in the context of release 1, right?
I'm not sure if yes, I'm assuming all of this is all these documents we're talking about are really in the context of release 1, not in the context of the workshop. So we probably need
what I'm getting at is it doesn't make sense to document what's happening here right now. I think it's much better to say document what needs to happen based on the new CRD design at this stage of the flow. I think the flow in general is very similar. I think at least that's my viewpoint at the moment. So what you'll see is that there will be, we have restructured some of these information in different CRs and CRDs. So as a result, how he gets to this thing is a bit different. So, but I think we should try to focus in the context of release 1 on that, right?
Yes, I agree. So I guess, yeah, what you're saying is that these documents that everybody's working on should be done with release 1 in mind, not the workshop in mind. Like as far as like not saying 5G topology controller, but saying NF topology controller.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Sorry, that brings up.
Now for that
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Thought you were done. Sorry.
So I just wanted to say for that we probably need to. I don't know whether we have agreement on the CRD proposal. Because we haven't discussed it. I yesterday submitted the document, but I don't know whether we have agreement on the CRD.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on yours a lot.
I think we have to be able to move. We can't sequence things that way. Like there will be adjustments to all of these diagrams as we go along. I mean, like right now, you said this sequence is almost the same. If you just had to change the names, it wouldn't actually be that hard, right? Like we can, I don't know. I think that let's get the rough shape. In my opinion, we get the rough things in shape, and then we'll iterate on all of them constantly. And
yeah, what I'm trying to say is that a lot depends on the CRD design. I think a number of these things will be dependent on that.
Yeah, 2 questions. The CRD design of modeling and design needs to get to an agreement point. I can take a crack for SMF, and based on what Stephen has started back in November, and then feel free to dive in and we can iterate. The other question I have, or suggestion is, for example, I was looking at the NF Injector Controller, and I wasn't quite sure like what it does, what is it, like how it can be used in SMF, how SMF, like some of the lower level details.
Yeah, and some of those things will change because of those CRD designs. So partly you have this NF Injector Controller the way it is right now, because we embed that UPF configuration information in the 5G topology controller, and we use the package, right, we're working within a set of primitives like this package deployment controller, which is ignorant of all this stuff. So we use annotations to kind of tie the individual package back to the configuration that's stored over there. And then the injector controller can read it from there and put it in. There might be a little bit less convoluted way to do that as we get CRDs that are designed a little bit differently. They could just inject it directly, or like it's you know, there's different, like that approach worked in the workshop in the context of our understanding at the time, and it will evolve. On the other hand, there's a slight difference in the way the workshop works versus I think the current CRD design, which in the way that whether it's package selection, whether a class refers to a package or whether packages are and classes are independent, right? So those make a big difference in which part of the code, what the output is, you know, what the inputs and outputs are. And so I need to look at the latest CRD proposal and understand it too. But this is what I mean, like, right?
So,
not totally settled. Yeah.
So at the moment, what it does basically two things. Just for FYI, to give you a high level idea of what it happens is it creates the UPF deploy. So what you get when NF Injector starts, you have UPF deployment, which is basically a CRD, which is empty. So what it does right now, it's a placeholder. So the first thing it does, it basically creates the UPF deployment. So for SMF, it would create an SMF1 and an AMF, depending on the thing. And the second thing it does, for each of the interfaces that are needed within that deployment, it creates IP allocations with a certain set of metadata to say, hey, I need IPs for each of these interfaces, right? That's what it does. And there's the two things it does. So that's what I also try to do, by the way, for the color coding. This red, and if you see red here, that means that the context that will be updated in this package are owned or done by this guy. Now, the problem is I can only display with two colors. Sometimes I need three colors. So this color is also representing which resource is either manipulated or created through which of these controllers. So red here means, so this NF injector basically touches UPF deployment. It also touches this one, but it's actually minor. So the two major things are those two.
Yeah, agree. And maybe we can take this offline because I don't want to chew up everybody's time here. But the other part that's not clear to me was, where does KPT versus operator come in this injector controller? Like, collectively, we need to make decisions so I can start double clicking, deep diving.
No, if you go, I wrote in a little bit of this up in the glossary or yesterday.
I haven't read the glossary, sorry.
No, of course, I just did it yesterday. But I tried to define injector because we were talking about trying to, like, specifically, most controllers, like if you look at package deployment controller, you look at 5G core topology controller, they monitor a CRD and they either emit other CRD, they monitor CRs, they emit other CRs or other resources, or they, call some actuation APIs. The injectors are sort of a sub kind of controller that what they do is they monitor in particular draft package revisions, and they look for draft package revisions, which is a type of resource. So in that sense, they're a controller, but they're not managing the whole draft package revision. They're looking at one little piece, one little slice, which is represented in these conditions, or they're looking at internally into the package, and they're taking action around one particular narrow part of that. So that's kind of why we use a different word, because the idea is to show that it's limited in its scope to inject configuration within a larger package as opposed to owning the whole package. Now, with respect to the two things the NF injector does right now, so right now, like Wim was saying, it sort of populates the whole UPF deployment based upon the UPF spec information that's stored in the 5G core topology. Now, I think that in the new, another approach to that is for some other controller to inject that right at the time you create the clone of the package, rather than that after the fact. So that's what I mean by it kind of depends on the CRDs and how we structure it. based on how we built the 5G core topology, we had to do it this way. I'm not sure if it's the right way. But then the analysis of, reading through and creating those interfaces, that might be something we do in a separate, like we have to debate all these things. So
yeah, and I can take a crack, put a stake in the ground, and then we can iterate and decide on the direction. But without that, it's kind of fuzzy to me on how to take it to implementation.
So we're almost out of time. What I would like to do is go through the list of what we're going to do next, our next steps are. But before I do that, I wanted to give anybody else an opportunity to raise any quick points.
Just one quick question, John, in that diagram. So there's also that logic that's split between kept functions and controllers. So what is the design choice? I mean, what is the design criteria for that?
Great question. So in general, kept functions or KRM functions, to be more accurate, because they're also used by customized. They're very they should sort of be hermetic within a package in general. There's other use cases we can use them in other ways, but sort of from a conceptual point of view, they're just they take a list of resources as input, they output a list of resources with some mutations. You can add stuff, you can modify stuff, but the idea is they shouldn't really be interacting with the outside world. You can, of course, there's escape hatches and things, but in general, from a conceptual design criteria point of view, controllers, which have, which are long-running processes, which can do all kinds of error handling and report status and do all kinds of things, they interact with the outside world. Whereas kept functions are more like, oh, I've got these two resources, they need to be internally consistent, so I'm gonna move some values around here. Or, I have an input, and that input needs to be copied to 7 different resources, so I'm going to do that in a kept function. And they're very it's like, think of Unix pipeline, very simple operations, inputs, outputs, and that's it. Whereas controllers talk to the rest of the world and do crazy stuff.
Would it be valid sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to complete that thread. So is that kept function, is it invoked by the controller? Is it managed by the controller, or is it something, I mean, I know it's part of the...
Yeah, so every time you save resources via the Porch API, which is just sitting on top of Git, Porch executes the kept functions that are part of the package pipeline. So within the package, it's got a list of functions to execute. So an example is set namespace. So what does set namespace do? You give it a namespace, and it goes in every single resource and makes sure that the namespace is set on that namespace resource. So if I add a new resource and I forget to put namespace in, it automatically gets set for me. So it just maintains the internal consistency of the package, but it doesn't really, do any, it doesn't interact with the world. So that's an example, but that gets listed in the pipeline of the kept file and gets executed every time. Now, that said, we've talked about, and Wim has a demonstration controller where you can take a set of kept functions and sort of separate them outside of the package and execute them from within the controller. So that's like another, and we also want to do the same thing in a package variant controller eventually. So it's kind of think of it as just a way to do predefined edits, and you can embed them in the package so that they get run every time you save the package, or you can use them externally as a bunch of predefined edits. So that clarified my question, whether or not a controller can invoke kept function outside the package to operate on the package. But that begs a second question, which is, how does an operator fit into that scheme or not? I mean, I don't have enough background. I mean, we're getting into a lot of detail, but we can
take this offline. Sorry.
Yeah, let's take it offline. Wim has an example of creating an operator that's just a list of kept functions. That's all you really need. Pure operators in his document. But anyway,
sorry.
The tasks I have written down on my little post-it note here. And SMF sequence diagram, Aravind drill in document from Wim's document. Tal work with Aravind. it sounds like I'll take the task of translating the doc into issues. And I'll do that today. And then Demetrius, create issues around his questions. Am I missing
Then
anything?
all review the CRD.
I'll review the CRDs. Okay.
The comment on the CRDs, ASDP, I think. I don't know when we want to conclude.
Yeah, at some point we should.
Because a lot will depend on that. A lot will depend on that.
Should we say by 1 week from today, we have an agreed upon first draft of the CRDs? Does that sound reasonable?
At least, in my view, the top should be defined. I think the lower levels can still wait a bit, in my view. The top side needs to be set in stone, I think.
We can set a date of saying then when are we going to say SIG 1, take a look at this.
Yeah.
And the next week for that would be pretty reasonable, I think.
Yeah, we should try next week to get, by a stable draft to get to SIG 1.
So SIG 1 meets on Monday next week. So
let's do that on the weekends then. Well, Monday, forget about Monday. Monday's not going to happen. It's President's Day.
It's a holiday.
It's a long
that's
weekend,
right.
yeah.
I don't think there will be meetings on Monday.
Okay.
We
We can send it to them without being it on a meeting alignment. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just, okay.
May I ask for a favor? I know from last night conversation that there are some differences in the CRD that are being worked out between interested parties, for lack of a better term. Can those discussions be more public instead of one-on-one or direct? Because I'm now playing catch up and I don't have an opinion. I just need to understand what the differences are and how we resolve them.
I try to document in the CRD proposal, I try to document the reasoning behind, but that's my view of the world probably, right?
that sounds like something we should iterate on.
I don't know if there've been calls. I think it's more like, I would say try and do it asynchronously as much as possible. In the document, and then if there's needs to be a call, try and.
We should iterate on the doc, and then if needed, we should go on Slack and say that let's have an ad hoc meeting.
But I guess it was my fault. I was caught by surprise that I thought the CRD were pretty much agree on, but apparently not. So.
Well, the CRD that comes from Google seed code is agreed upon by Google, right? This is what we're seeding, right? So, but we've tried to clarify that in as many ways as we can. And as soon as the seed code drops, you will see that CRD implemented, right? But yeah, the public the discussion around it in the community is just starting right now, really. I don't think there's been anything private happening. There have been a few discussions on Slack and inside the document.
Okay.
And so far, we really only have one a proposal to change it from Vim, right? There are not additional proposals. So that's what's on the table right now. And yeah, you can jump into the discussion. I don't think anything has been private as far as I know.
Yeah, I'm less interested in debating. I just want to get to a conclusion so I can start trying to translate that into.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to say is so I know we're over time, but to Tal's point, right? There's going to be what the seed code delivers, but then there's going to be what's in R1, right? And there's going to be a process by which the community has to make one into the other, right? And so what we're trying to agree to is what's going to be in R1. And so that's what Wim's document is about. He and Stephen, I don't know if they met, but I think they did, to talk about that. And then the conclusion of their meeting was, let's create this document. And so that's what's out of that now. And that's what Wim is asking us all to take a close look at.
And since Tal brought it up, when is the seed code dropping?
The plan is in 2 weeks, right?
End of the month, I think, right? End of Feb.
Yeah.
Okay.
End of month, yeah.
We're working very hard on it. There's extricating open source from proprietary code is non-trivial. Right? But it's,
okay. Yeah, makes sense.
So I think all of you are familiar with that process.
Yeah.
So just to understand, Wim, you said that from the CRE perspective, I mean, obviously we have to take everything, but from the making it concrete perspective, you said the top level one is the highest priority?
See, I try to, the document basically goes with the flow, right? You start with NF topology, then you have NF instance sets, and then you have, within an NF instance set, you basically have templates, and you have, a template has a set of attributes, and then there is a reference to a class. The next step is basically what we call the UPF deployment, which is basically what gets dehydrated, right? In this, so there's this one, what we are talking about is, and that would go to the workload cluster eventually on which the workload cluster operates. And so that, I think that one can wait a little bit. So I think the top one is probably important because that allows us to document everything what we need to do at this, what is in this diagram somehow, and we need to see how the components would work together to achieve a package that contains something, and then we can agree later on the content of that, in my view. So that's why I think NF topology, NF instance sets are the most urgent ones.
Okay, got it.
Sorry,
I just wanted to
Tal,
go. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm late for a meeting, so I'm going to have to drop. But yeah, I guess.
Okay. So
When
I'll just add a quick point.
just stop the recording, otherwise it'll wait until everybody hangs up.
Yes, I'll stop here.
Yeah, yeah, we are over time. I'll just add, Bala,
Isn't that nice? Now you can just manually stop it.
And the question
Right.
is, how do I do it?
Now I can say anything. It's off the record.
No,
So,
wait, not yet.
It's still on the record. So I'll just point out, this is why it's so critical for me to understand, in your diagram, for example, you say that fan out is not included here, but in order to understand the design of the CR, you have to understand the process by which the CR changes. What does hydration mean exactly? Right? This is a concept. Right. So I think to join in on this discussion, we need to understand hydration and fan out very carefully, because that can tell us which parts should go at which stages, right? So my argument is to push it more later, right? But that's kind of where my disagreement with Wim about putting in
attachment interface or attachment. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think the discussion there, in my view, Tal, is a bit more the shift left versus shift right, which means that you do things later versus earlier. I think because in the new proposal, which I have, NF attachments are in the NF template, which is part of the network function, by the way. So that's in the new CRD proposal. It is in there.
Okay. Well, sure, but my point is for people to join in this discussion, they need to have a good understanding of migration and fan out. That's my only point. Yeah,
for sure.
Quick question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
That's a great point, Charles. I mean, just to understand these terminologies in the contextually is very important. Yeah.
I'll admit it's new for me as well. There are concepts here that do not exist normally in the Kubernetes world. This is a new concept that we're putting forth, right, as part of as part of our very particular take on shift left, right? So, yeah.
Want to double click on what Wim just said. I just blanked out the word. The part that now is included in the NF template, that to me is shift right? Because now you're pushing it into the NF template, or is it shift left? That's where I'm confused.
Shift right is doing as much as possible after someone committed a deployment. Shift left is when you do as much as possible before someone committed to a deployment. So that's probably more a good demarcation point.
Okay.
Yes.
So is that the common agreement then?
Shift left is basically, by the way, tomorrow, if you're interested in LFN, I have a slide on shift left, by the way, so it will be public anyhow. But it's basically the idea is,
yeah.
Yes, I will post my slides there. But so basically the idea is try to get or do as much as possible upfront, as much as you can. So the idea is everything you can validate or figure out ahead of time, it's time gained by the end of during the whole process. That's the whole idea of shift left. And so we try to do much more upfront than trying to wait till the end to find issues, for example, in this context.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm just trying to find a demarcation line, and then for SMF, like, which way to go.
So here is the thing. So I think at the moment we decided to say, okay, based on the previous conversation, to say let's start with shift left, but we don't exclude shift right, right? So the difference is the following. At the moment in our POC, and what we're also trying to do in release 1 is like IP addresses, like NEDs, all that configuration happens at the management cluster.
Okay.
You see, so I know the IPs, all the NEDs, every piece of configuration that you want, we will figure that out in the management cluster. So when you get the information, the only thing you have to say is, I need on this interface this IP, just make it happen. Whereas the shift right approach, what is that you don't define the IPs up front, you deploy the network function, and during that deployment, you ask for an IP. Just to give you a context, what is the difference between left or right? And
well,
there will be cases where you cannot do left anyhow, right? So that's where we have to find. So there is deployments where people want to do everything left, but some people want to do everything right, and there is something in the middle. I'm of the opinion.
In my experience,
my personal view, if I may, is everything you can do up front, or you should try to do up front, and everything you cannot, you should wait till the end. But that's my personal view. And
so
sorry
to extend the meeting. People, please feel free to drop and ignore me. But
I'm still recording, by the way. Is that okay? It's okay, right?
This is work. This is technical. At Cisco, when we did the deployment of Verizon network infra, right, services and devices, the IP allocation get deferred until deployment time, until basically it's shift right, because at the different site there may be different IP pools available, and the same thing at VMware. And now with shift left within the telco RAN context, that's where I'm not so sure if it's something, especially with the edge site, whether or not IP allocation, for example, since you brought it up, could be done at the shift right level, a shift left level, instead of deferring to shift right. So I'm trying to,
That's why I'm saying, there will be customers that try to do as much as everything up front, predefined. There's people who don't. So that's why I think we have to define Nephew in a way that we can be flexible to accommodate different designs, right? And so we have to, because of release 1, we have to pick one first, because we started with shift left, so let's do that. But I think we agreed with Tal and John that we will probably in release 2 also do the shift right part, right? So we don't want, with everything that we are defining, we are not locking ourselves into one or the other, right? So we have to be able to be flexible to do one or the other, and we have to keep it in the back of our mind that we don't do anything that avoids or avoids us doing the other side if we want to do so. Yeah, correct.
Okay, got it.
And by the way, I don't disagree with the principle of move everything to the left that you can. I just disagree about what you can and what you can't, right? I think certain things you really can't, right? So, and specifically, it's because we're in the cloud, right? Things are very ephemeral. A lot of things change, and the decisions have to be autonomous. What here are called right. These principles of left versus right might be a little bit confusing, but it comes from the idea of a kind of a CI/CD pipeline where you start at the left and you kind of read left to right. So you have to think in terms of left to right languages here, right? So something comes in the left, it starts there, and then you iterate and you make changes until you get to the right. At the far right, it comes out of the pipeline into the actual real world, right? But the declarative world is not a pipeline, right? The declarative world is what actually, at the end of the day, you get something out of the pipeline to the right.
But don't you need both? I mean, certain cases, like one thing where you might need the right hand one occurred to me was, say you have something that's generating config using AI or ML and feeding it back in some sort of autonomous loop. Maybe we're talking about Nephew version 28 for this, but something like that. That's something that's really out there. That's something kind of ultra right. Maybe now we shouldn't use that expression, but But I know everything that should be done. I think everything that should be done as left wing as possible, because so that the earlier you do things, the better. But in some cases, there's some things you have to do out there, so we have to kind of support both.
Agree. Especially with the AI ML.
I know I haven't been talking much in these calls, but I usually kind of let people talk, and if I disagree with something, then they can discuss the thing evolves, and look at when it comes to the implementation, then something kind of implementable, then I get involved.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say the AI ML part really push it to the right from what I've seen and what I'm reading up on, because when the algorithm kicks in and start making adjustment locally, things can change very quickly at that level.
I tend to agree with you. However, there's also work being done on AI ML optimization on the left, right?
Yes,
so to make sure.
yes.
So it is a matter of both, but really the narrative here is one of control. Who gets to make the decisions? Is it a centralized decision? Or is it decisions being made autonomously on the right? And without a doubt, we need both. There are advantages to the left and there are advantages to the right. The devil is in the details, as I like to say.
Yeah, and there's some things that can only be done on the left, and there's some things that can only be done, well, maybe everything can be done on the right, but there are certain things, maybe everything can be done on the right, but there's certain things that can only be done on the right, maybe.
I can give you one input, like basically at least in 5G deployments, because there is a strict homing requirement between, say, the DU to the CU or the RAN to the AMF and the UPF to SMF. So a lot of it is actually done statically. So which seems to be like a more shift left model, where because there's no kind of DNS resolutions, there's no FQDNs and all. They don't take that. They take the DNS out of the picture as much as possible. So
This is all true, but I would say that in terms of shift left, you don't really need a lot of Kubernetes, right? We have a management cluster here, we have controllers, we have kept functions, but all of the shift left stuff is not new. I mean, it's what we've been doing in Telco for a long time, but we were calling it top down. You have a service orchestrator that plans everything, designs everything.
It's all the telco world is all incremental, right? So they have the cloud side, they have the transport side, and then there is like all these people have to come together. So it's very legacy to. It's like very brownfield deployments, right? So I'm just they mostly focus on the hardware software decoupling and the iteration and all that. So, but yeah, eventually it might get down to everything dynamic, but there's a lot of static aspects that goes on today. So
yeah, I don't think shift left is new. This is not new for us. It's actually what we've been doing this entire time. What Kubernetes introduces is the idea of autonomy, of operators and controllers, and the ability to do much more powerful things on the right than we did before. So it's a matter of us balancing these things and finding what we can actually delegate and what we can keep on the left. So I think what we've been doing in FEO so far is introducing maybe a new way of thinking of working on the left. Until now, it's been handled by higher level orchestrators, right? The Etsy Mano architecture is a pyramid, right? You have orchestrator of orchestrators. So you start from the top and you bottle down to the bottom. At the bottom, you just get commands. Here are the Kubernetes resources, deploy them, right?
Yeah.
We're changing it a bit and like toppling it on the left. So instead of saying it's top down, we're saying it's left to right. And it happens in the management cluster and things are much more flattened, right? So it's rather than a higher level service orchestrator telling you what to do, you actually at this level can make changes and what we're calling configuration changes to your deployment. So we'll see. This is a new concept. I'm really excited to see how the community really takes this and looks at this. But it's important for us to understand it. And I think not all of us have completely grokked the entire system here. What is hydration? What is fanning out? How do you move from left to right here is pretty unique. So
I think it's a new way of doing something that's not that new.
Exactly. Yeah. I would agree 100% with that. Yes.
I mean, would you call this shift left? Because at different companies, projects and all that, people use the word choreography different localized controller working together instead of a top-down orchestrator, right?
Yeah.
Especially in networking infra setup, device services. So shift left is really choreography, right?
Well, it's a different orchestration.
Am I mixing terms?
Yeah.
Maybe
I like yeah.
Maybe it's maybe it's doing as much as possible, as generally as possible, as early as possible.
Yeah.
Like that's I would say that the guys that were building sailing ships in the east coast of America 150 years ago were doing the very same thing.
Yeah, there's nothing new here in terms of that.
Yeah.
But I think what's changed, I call it, Etsy has informed a lot of our thinking for a while, since the 2014 NFV paper and Etsy Mano, that model. We've really been thinking in terms of pyramids. I think what Kubernetes is allowing us to do is to think of what I call side-by-side orchestration. So the operator pattern is not that there's one on top of the other, but it's actually they work side by side, they can work together, you can chain them together. So we're breaking that hierarchy a bit and introducing more flexibility at more levels. But the thinking has not changed. We still want centralized control and management.
That I would completely agree with. Kubernetes brings a whole new way of doing things to the picture, and it just exposes a lot more mechanisms and tools to do these things in better ways. And we just have to agree on how we do that.
I think we're all in violent agreement.
Yes.
Well,
yeah, but
we're also all way over time, so I think we should probably stop at some point.
I'm just like you said. I'm excited to see how this play out, because a lot of
I think probably
we talk about.
Stop the recording now. I can only see. I was talking to PMO admin. I don't know who his PMO admin is, but just stop the recording.
Should I stop the recording? Do you want me to stop? I can stop.
Yeah,
I'll stop it.
Yeah, cool.